Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityurma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Lead me from the unreal to the real. Lead me from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Om. Peace, peace, peace. Good morning, everybody. Namaste. Good morning. Today is the thrice blessed day. Technically not today, tomorrow. Buddha Purnima. It's the day when Bhagavan Buddha was born more than 2,500 years ago. It's the day when he attained enlightenment, Bodhi, and the final nirvana when he left his body. So the thrice blessed day. It is celebrated not only in India but all over the world, in the United Nations also. A gentleman who works in the United Nations said a couple of years back on this day, he said, we are celebrating Vesak today. And being from India, I didn't quite get it. What was Vesak? Then I, of course, immediately thought about it. It's Vaishakhi. So that in the Southeastern Asian countries, Thailand and other places, it's called Vesak. And it's widely celebrated across the Southern Asia or Far East also. And now in the United Nations also. On this day, I usually give a talk about the life and teachings of the Buddha, but not today. What I'm going to do today is a little different. You have seen the subject, Vedantic Self and Buddhist Non-Self, or Buddhist No-Self. That's what we'll talk about. Why this subject? A couple of reasons. One reason is that it keeps coming up. Buddhism is so popular, and when we talk about Vedanta or any of the Hindu philosophies, one question that will inevitably come up if you think a little bit about it is you keep talking about the self, the Atman. Of course, self with a capital S, nevertheless, a self. An independent, unitary, eternal entity. Exactly what the Buddhists deny. So there is no independent, eternal, separate self. It's exactly the opposite of. It's basically fundamentally what Buddhism is about, denying that. According to Buddhism, there is no such self. Not only that, it would be terrible if there were. It is the clinging to the concept of such a self. It's that self-clinging which is samsara. You free yourself from that, then you will get liberation. It seems to be just the 180 degrees opposite to what Hinduism is saying. So Vedantic Self, I keep talking about the Atman, and the Buddha and the Buddhists for 2,500 years, they keep talking about the Anatman, not self. So I thought we should talk about it. I have spoken about it on different occasions, but a full talk. Also, a second reason for this would be, I actually did some work on this a couple of years back. I was part of a fellowship program at Harvard Divinity School. So during my time at Harvard University, I studied Buddhism quite a bit under two different, very well-known professors. Of course, it was an academic study. I'm not a Buddhist, as you know. I'm a Vedantic monk. But I studied it under, I would say, world authorities. Professor Garfield, I studied Indo-Tibetan Madhyamaka Buddhism. And one of the things that I had to do was work on Chandrakirti's 7-point reasoning, the attack on the concept of the self, and what would Advaita Vedanta say to that. So I wrote this paper called Chandrakirti's Chariot, and I remember submitting it to Professor Garfield, who immediately rejected it. He said, "What do you think this is? A Vedanta society, he said, a Vedanta temple talk? It's a paper submitted at Harvard University. So you have to do these things. So I rewrote it again, and he promptly rejected it again. So the third time I submitted it, incorporating all his suggestions, which are all very good. And then finally, he was happy with it. He said it's a very good defense of Advaita Vedanta. He didn't say very good. He said good defense of Advaita Vedanta against the Tibetan Buddhist attack on the concept of self. So because I put in that work, I thought let's just talk about it for some time. So let's start with the Buddha anyway. 2,500 years ago, we all know the story how Prince Siddhartha, in a small North Indian kingdom, which is now partly in North India, partly in Nepal, he was born there. He was a prince, and he was always deeply spiritual. It was predicted that he would either become a world conqueror or a world teacher, spiritual master, which he became both. Sort of. He is one of the greatest spiritual masters that the humanity has known, and has conquered the world. I mean, in that sense, the influence of Buddhism is across the whole world. Right here in the United States, for example. 2,500 years later, he continues to be highly revered, studied, taught, commented upon. His teachings have been elaborated endlessly over the last 25 centuries. We know very briefly that he saw these four sights as a young prince, saw an old person, a sick person, and a dead person, and then a monk. And then he saw that this suffering is all-pervasive. And there's a quest to overcome suffering, embodied by the monk. So he decides to become a monk in search of a solution to suffering. Remember, this is remarkable because he was not suffering. In fact, he was having a whale of a time. He was partying all day and night. So he was married to this beautiful princess. They had a little son, Rahula, and so on. But he noticed that nobody can escape suffering. Not his mother. He had lost his mother when he was young. Not his parents, the king and the queen. Not he himself, the prince. And so he sets out on a quest to overcome suffering. Importantly, not just for himself, but for everybody. That there should be an end to suffering, because not just my suffering, but suffering per se. Then he goes and importantly, he meets a number of spiritual masters, and he recounts this later on. They were some of the leading teachers of his time, and he learns from them, not satisfied with what they had taught him, not just the philosophy, but the practices. And then he goes on his own, and finally, under the Bodhi tree, he discovers the truth, the real nature of the self and the world, what is reality, and that reality sets him free. So that freedom is called nirvana. Bodhi, wisdom, enlightenment, sets him free. And then he, for the next 40 years, this is the first 40 years of his life, next 40 years he roams the length and breadth of North India. And he organizes this huge monastic order. It was initially a very part of the general society. It was not distinct from Hinduism in any way in those days. And it was a group of dedicated band of practitioners, all monks. Later on, nuns, bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, and lay people. And finally, it was codified into this religion on its own, the Buddha Dharma. And from the very beginning, it spread across India and then beyond the frontiers of India. Swami Vivekananda says about the tolerance, the acceptance of the Hindus, that here is a teacher, a prominent teacher, who disavows, who does not accept the authority of your texts, the Vedas, and criticizes the orthodox religion of the time to your face. And he was not only tolerated, he was honored, he was accepted. Huge numbers of people converted into Buddhism, became Buddhists. I don't know if at any time the majority of Indians were Buddhists, but certainly a very big minority, very large numbers of people. They were large monasteries. They were the first universities of the world, huge universities which came up, and that will play some role in our talk today. And then Buddhism spread across India and beyond India to Sri Lanka. The Emperor Ashoka sent his own son and daughter as emissaries of Buddhism to Southeast Asia, to what is now Thailand and Burma, and then later on across the mountains to Tibet. This is, of course, hundreds of years later. To Tibet, to China, Korea, Japan, up to the Middle East also. What is now Afghanistan, and in the Middle East there are some records of Buddhist monks going as far as that. So, and today it's all over the world. It's here in the United States, very prominent. The Dalai Lama is one of the most well-known figures in the world today. All right. Now, what happened was, as the Buddhists, Buddha and the Buddhists after him, advocated the doctrine of not self or no self, anatma. I'll use the term no self. No self against the Hindu teaching of a self. The Hindus naturally responded. The various schools of Hinduism, philosophical schools, like the Nyaya, the Vaisheshika, the Sankhya, and the Purva Mimamsa, these four were prominent in responding to the attacks from Buddhist schools. Remember, it's not that the Buddhists were only debating with the Hindus. The multiple Buddhist schools came up which were engaged with each other in debate. So I remember one class in Professor Garfield's class where one of the Buddhist philosophers is making some attacks on this person, on this school, that school. I don't know what those English terms mean. So I sort of approximate translations in Sanskrit. I thought this was this particular Hindu school, that particular Hindu school, and Professor Garfield smiled and said, none of them are Hindu schools, they are all Buddhist schools. So he's attacking other Buddhists. So there was an enormous amount of debate on various issues. One of those issues was the existence of a self, of an Atman. And allied to this was the issue, actually a secondary issue of God. Because the Nyaya school, for example, would say, Atma, there is an eternal self. We are an immortal soul, an eternal self. And this eternal self comes in two varieties, two flavors. One is sentient beings like us, each of us individually. We are eternal selves, Atma. And there is one special kind of Atma of which there is only one, and that's God. So God and immortal souls, they are all Atmas. One is Atma, one is Paramatma, Jivatma, Paramatma, this individual sentient being and the Supreme Lord. So if you could dismiss the individual, eternal individual being, self, you could dismiss the God also. That would be another avenue of attack. So these were two areas of attack, of debate between the Buddhists and the Hindu schools and among each other also, over a period of 1,000 years. There was a course by Professor Patil at Harvard, which I really liked it. Intensive course on classical Indian Buddhism. 1,000 years of Buddhist philosophy in Sanskrit, translated into incomprehensible English, and endless readings, handouts, most of which made very little sense if you read it in English. But still, very interesting. This was one of the golden periods of development of Indian philosophy. The other one, I would say, was later in the medieval period when Buddhism had all but disappeared from India. Then the real debate was between the non-dualists, the Advaitins, and the other schools, the dualists, Dvaitins, the Vishishtadvaitins, qualified monists, and various other schools of Vedanta and Nyaya attacking non-dualism. And so there was another burst of development in Indian philosophy. So these two eras. But primarily, the 1,000 years which followed the Buddha, more than 1,000 years actually, up to the end of the first millennium. What would the Buddha himself thought about it? I think he wouldn't have had a very high opinion of all of this. There is, for example, in Buddha's original dialogues, there is this, when he sees this subtle debates going on. He said, "O monks, when your house is on fire, would you debate the nature of fire or would you put it out? When you are shot with an arrow, would you give discourses on arrows or, help try to take the arrow out and save yourself? Such is the nature of suffering. Instead of discoursing on the nature of suffering, on subtle discussions on that, one would try to overcome suffering." And so when the Buddha was asked questions like this, does the self exist or does it not? Will the Buddha be there after death? after the death of the body, and so on. Number of questions. In fact, 14 great silences of the Buddha are there. Why did the Buddha keep silent on these subjects? If you ask the Buddha, today's question, self or no self? Is there a self? The Buddha's answer actually was, did I say there was? So the monk, the bhikkhu, jumps to the other conclusion. Oh, so there is no self. Did I say there was not? Then he's puzzled. What do you mean? There either is or there is not. And then the Buddha says, and so other teachers teach this. Some say there is a self, some say there is nothing. And they were nihilists or materialists who said there was no permanent self at all, this matter. So what are you teaching? He says, I teach that there is suffering, and there is a reason for suffering, cause, and there is an end to suffering, and there is a way out of suffering, the Four Noble Truths. Very practical, a practical system of ethics and meditation, designed to take you directly to enlightenment and freedom. So, dukkha, suffering, first noble truth. Sarvam dukkham, all is suffering. Somebody told me, don't translate it as suffering, because a lot of people are actually not suffering. But just about everybody is dissatisfied. So translate it as dissatisfaction with state of things. And it can intensify into pain and suffering. Then the second one is, there is a cause of this. It's not just random. There's a cause of suffering, and that is desire, trishna, thirst. The thirst for making this seeming individual self fully satisfied with this world, and not being happy if I'm not fully satisfied all the time. Like thinking, everybody should be endlessly nice to me all the time. It sounds ridiculous if I say that, but my behavior seems to show that I implicitly believe that. Somebody is rude to me, and I become unhappy for the rest of the day. Why? Because I believe somewhere everybody all the time should be consistently, endlessly nice to me. No. So this thirst that everything should be perfect for me all the time, otherwise I'm going to be dissatisfied. Third, is there an end to this? Yes. Whatever has a cause can be started and stopped. You remove the cause, it will stop. So the end is called nirvana, freedom. The Indologist Heinrich Zimmer, he says that the philosophies of India are actually optimistic. They sound pessimistic because they talk about suffering, but they're optimistic because they all offer an end to suffering. And that end is in our own hands. It's a spiritual end in which we can generate ourselves. So nirvana, it's an old and very honored term in India. There are many such words: nirvana, moksha, kaivalya, apavarga. They all mean the same thing. And different philosophies had these terms. So nirvana is possible. And then, what is the method? The eightfold way, Ashtanga Marga. I'm not going to go into that. Eightfold way. That's the method. One medieval philosopher, Madhavacharya, he wrote this book, Sarva Darshana Sangraha, a collection of different philosophies. So towards the end, he says, these philosophers are like chikitsakanamiva, just like doctors. What do? They see the symptom, pain, suffering. Then they identify the cause. What's the disease? Desire, trishna. Then they identify that whether it's curable or incurable, and they come to the conclusion it's curable. There is nirvana, moksha. You can attain peace and fulfillment. You can go beyond suffering. And then, is there a treatment? Yes, there is a treatment. That is the marga, the way. So Buddha is like that. The symptom, the cause, the cure, and the treatment. So that was the Buddha and the Buddhist Sangha which came up. About 500 years after the Buddha, the greatest of the Buddhist philosophers, I would say. There are many, many great philosophers. Nagarjuna, Dharmakirti, Chandrakirti, Dingnaga. Extraordinary people whose value we are only now beginning to, sort of excavate, actually. You have to do a little bit of philosophical, like archaeological digging, philosophical digging to see how remarkable they were. Just about every philosophical point of view under the sun today had already been discussed threadbare in ancient India more than 1,000, 1,500 years ago. But among them, shines undisputed brightness is Nagarjuna, who lived in the south of India, in what is now Andhra. And he is famous for his book, the Moola Madhyamaka Karika. Moola Madhyamaka Karika. So the kind of Buddhism which traces itself back to Nagarjuna. He was just elaborating the teachings of the Buddha. So it is called Madhyamaka Buddhism. Madhyama literally means the middle path. So the middle path. Here, middle path philosophically. Between the two extremes of eternalism, Hindus, and nihilism, that nothing exists, like the materialists. There's no truth at all. There's nothing. That's materialism. He says, no, there is. There is a spiritual truth which will set you free. But it's not what the other schools, the orthodox schools of Hinduism are saying, that there is one separate, limited self. There's a body, there's a mind, and there is an Atma. Not like that. So the middle path, Madhyamaka, middle path philosophically. Nagarjuna took Buddha's silence philosophically. Why did Buddha keep quiet? One reason was practical. Be spiritual, get enlightenment. But also, the silence was the correct answer to these questions. Because any answer you express in language is actually logical. If you want a very precise logical answer, it'll be wrong. Whatever you say. If you say there is no Atma, wrong. If you say there is the self, wrong. Yeah. Why is that so? How can you logically formulate that truth? So that was Nagarjuna's effort, what he tried to do. He also, if you see the book Moola Madhyamaka Karika, it's fascinating. Philosophers, I think, especially nowadays, and so many philosophers are fascinated with it. It's entirely negative. It demolishes everything. He says, Shunyata sarva drishtinam, the emptiness of all philosophies. Not only philosophies, whatever we think and do in daily life, all of it is full of contradictions. One reason might be because of all these subtle discussions, he wanted to show that you will not come at a formulated philosophy, linguistically formulated philosophy, which will adequately grasp the truth. You can't do it. Even simple things cannot be grasped by logic. So, I think 23 chapters. He demolishes concept of a self, Atma. He demolishes the concept of Dharma. He demolishes the concept of Tathagata, Buddha. He's Buddhist. Demolishes the concept of the Four Noble Truths. Demolishes the concept of Nirvana, freedom. But what he's doing is not that they are wrong. He's saying the way you're trying to express them and limit them, this is what the Buddha taught. That doesn't work. Why it doesn't work, he will show. Even common things like walking. Just walking, the ordinary walking that we do. He says even that's full of contradiction. I'll give you a sample of Nagarjuna today, quickly. So he says, we say the walker is walking. And his question is, who is walking? Well, the walker is walking. But the walker is defined as somebody who's walking, right? Who already has the property of walking. The action of walking is inherent in the walker. See, he's using language which was used by the Nyayas. So Nyaya school, you need to know a little bit of Nyaya philosophy. They were realists. They took the common sense experience of the world as real and described it with their philosophy. So action. Inherent action is there in the agent. You are walking, so there is an action called walking. It's really there. And where is it? It's in you. Everything has to be clear. There is a person who's walking. Walking is an action. Where is the action? It can't be in the road. It must be in you. So you are the walker and walking is in you. Nagarjuna asks, so you are the walker? Yes. How do you define as the walker? The one who has the property of walking. Now you say, who is walking? The walker is walking. So there is two walkings. One, the walker has the property of walking in you, and then the walker is walking. So there are two walkings. Then Dvirgamanam Syat. Did he walk twice? So no. He walked only once. So it is the person who was not walking, that person walks. So the not walker walks. Do you see the contradiction in that? He said, no. I mean, it's just a person. There's no such thing as walking in him. So where is the walking? It's in the road. Is the road walking? So he goes. You see, the whole book is like that. So if you ask him, he developed this, what is called Chatushkoti, the four options or the four alternatives. A very powerful logical tool. It was about 2,000 years ago. where any question you throw at him, any philosophy, he tears it to pieces based on these 4 alternatives. What are the 4 alternatives? Suppose you say something like, there is God. He will show that it is wrong that there is God. Oh, so you are trying to show you are a Buddhist, you don't believe in God, there is no God. He says it is wrong to say that there is no God. Oh, so then God both is and is not. That's a contradictory statement. How can God both be and not be? So it is wrong to say that God is and is not. So is it that God neither is nor is not? And he said, no, that is wrong. It's not that God neither is nor is not. So these are the 4 alternatives. You say there is a self. He says, no, I will show that there cannot be an Atman, as you will see how he will show. There can't be a self. So there is no self, no Atma. No, that's also wrong. It's not that there is no Atma. So there both is a self and not there is no self. So that's obviously contradictory. So it's not that there is a self and there is no self. So the opposite of that, you deny that. There is neither a self nor not a self. He says neither that also. Chatush koti vinirmukta tattvam. The reality is beyond the 4 alternatives. Beyond the 4 alternatives is reality. That's what he calls shunyam, emptiness. Emptiness is, if you examine any view, any philosophical view which is positively stated, he says I can demonstrate logically that it falls apart. And that's the emptiness of that view. Somebody says, wait a minute, your philosophy, Mr. Nagarjuna, Professor Nagarjuna, let's say, Professor Nagarjuna, your philosophy, your view, so that according to you, that also should be empty. Nagarjuna says, but I don't have a view. Shunyata sarva drishtinam, emptiness of all views. If I had a view, you could cut it down, but since I have no view, you can't cut it down. So this is a kind of debate in ancient India. It was called Vitanda. To understand this, there were 3 kinds of debates which were popular. Vada, Jalpa, Vitanda. Vada was a debate between, say, people who were trying to find the truth, inquiry. You could shift your positions and learn and change your ideas and all of that. Then that's the best kind of debate. And ideally, debates were supposed to be like that. But practically, they were not. There was a second kind of debate was Jalpa, where you had your position and your opponent has their position, and then you debate. You try to establish your position and cut down the opponent's position. The opponent tries to establish their position and cut down your position. Swapaksha sthapanam, parapaksha dushanam. That is and there are so many techniques and rules. These ancient debates were like gladiatorial combats, intellectual. So they are very sophisticated system of debate, and it was a wonderful thing. It prevented a lot of crudeness and violence in ancient India. So you only experts engaged in this, and it would be conducted at a very high level of sophistication. Sometimes they actually met and discussed these things. Sometimes it was in writing. The third kind of debate which Nagarjuna is doing is called Vitanda. Vitanda means, I have no position. I'll just cut down whatever you say. Now, that sounds very rude, but actually that's a very sophisticated form of philosophy. That any kind of philosophical position is bound to be false. You state it, I'll show you that it is false. I'm not saying that there's no truth, but the truth lies beyond your philosophical positions. So Nagarjuna is a classical case of a Vitanda type of debate. Another one well known is Sri Harsha, who was, interestingly, an Advaitin, non-dualist. And he follows the same technique. Whatever position you have, I'll show you it's wrong. And by that, what I'm trying to teach, non-dual Vedanta, will stand automatically established. I don't have to argue to establish it. Sri Harsha is one of the very few classical Indian Hindu philosophers who says Nagarjuna is right. He says at the very beginning, with the Madhyamakas, that means Nagarjuna's followers, we have no quarrel. He says at the beginning of his text. His text is Khandana Khanda Khadya, the cookies of refutation. Khanda Khadya means sweets or cookies. So the book is called the cookies of the delicious of refutation, of cutting down. He delights in cutting down other people's views. So Nagarjuna wrote this book, 23 chapters, all entirely negative. And whatever philosophy you could have, including, very fairly, just about all Buddhist approaches, he cuts it down. Now he had commentators, those who developed his philosophy further, not too much. The major person whom we are interested in today is Chandrakirti. Chandrakirti. one of the greatest Buddhist philosophers today, because he lived about 1500 years ago. He did not have much of a following in India, but later on his work took a new life in Tibet. Basically, Orthodox Tibetan Buddhism today, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the monks who follow him, the philosophy which he teaches is based on Chandrakirti's interpretation of Nagarjuna's interpretation of the Buddha. Buddha, let's not forget the Buddha. Buddha, I can imagine Buddha tearing his hair. I didn't say all this. And Nagarjuna says, you did, just keep quiet. Let me explain it to them. So Buddha, the Nagarjuna 500 years after the Buddha, and about 400 years after Nagarjuna's Chandrakirti, who was also born in the south of India. I think he converted to Buddhism, and then he rose to great prominence as a Buddhist teacher, as a monk. And then he studied and he taught at the famous University of Nalanda, which is in Bihar today. Bihar, the word Bihar also comes from, it means Buddhist monastery, Vihara, where thousands of Buddhist monks used to stay together. Some of these monasteries became universities. Nalanda, Vikramshila, Odantapuri, Takshashila. So, huge university systems. Nalanda, when Nalanda was finally destroyed by Muslim invaders around 12th, 13th century, Bhaktiar Khilji, he raised the... for them, they were all, heretics and kafirs, so no distinction between Buddhists, Hindus, whoever. So just kill them and wipe out, destroy the monasteries. By that time, already Buddhism was sort of very faint in Hindu. It had diminished greatly. And Nalanda was destroyed. They said it burnt for weeks or months. They had a 7-story library, they say, that has not yet been excavated. If you go there, it's one of the wonders of the world. They have excavated a university which was established 1500 years ago, lasted for nearly 800 years, a university, and 1 kilometer long, and that's only 1/10 of the university. That the rest still lies underground. If you go there, 11,000 students used to study, all male, of course, in those days, and each had his own room. So individual rooms. If you go there, you'll see little and pretty nice rooms. And we were lucky. What they did was, when the rooms and the buildings got damaged, instead of demolishing them and repairing them, what they did was they built over them. So nowadays it's great for archaeologists, because if you dig deep down, you find newer and newer universities. So, and you can see the last modifications, the last iteration of Nalanda University is pretty crude compared to the original one. So clearly the patrons, the kings, it was all, royal patronage. So clearly the kings were less powerful, less rich. But at that time, Nalanda was rising, 1500 years ago, when Chandrakirti was there. And he became one of the greatest teachers that Nalanda had. And the abbot, with something like the head of the department of Buddhist studies or something. But there was something more than Buddhist studies also. If you go to Nalanda, you will find there's a little museum with not only Buddhist artifacts, but also Hindu artifacts, clearly non-Buddhist artifacts. So Chandrakirti rose to great prominence there, and he's a very well-known teacher. Why am I going on about Chandrakirti? Because he wrote some books, commentaries on Nagarjuna, which finally sort of faded into obscurity. The debate took on different forms, and then slowly the Purva Mimamsa school led by Kumarila Bhatta, and then Shankaracharya's Vedanta school, it came to prominence. Buddhism declined and finally disappeared. Around 12th century, when Nalanda was finally destroyed and razed to the ground, it's interesting. That's when the oldest university in the West, Oxford, the oldest college in Oxford, Balliol College, that was coming up in the 13th century in England. I went to England, I saw the college and saw the date, 1280 or something. That's around the time that Nalanda finally collapsed. I think all those professors must have been reborn to carry on their work. It's not impossible, because Ma Sharda, she went on a tour of the ruins of the Buddhist monasteries once. And there were a group of English men and women who were also touring at that time. And the English men and women were oohing and eyeing about all these ancient relics. And then she was smiling. They asked her why she's smiling. And she said something very cryptic. Look at them. They are the ones who built all this. And now they come and wonder at their own handiwork. So maybe there are these ancient souls who've been, that's really tenure. Lasting for thousands of years across lifetimes. You become a professor wherever you go. All right. I've been avoiding starting the subject. Now let's start. So this Chandrakirti, what he did was, he focused his attack on the concept of self, Atma. And this he did by the 7-point reasoning. The 7-point reasoning, which I will run through quickly now, and then give a reaction from a Advaita perspective. Just by the way, why reaction from the Advaita perspective? Why do I have to do this? Because there is really no cogent reaction from the Advaita perspective. Those who debated against Chandrakirti and other Buddhist philosophers were the Hindu Naiyayikas, Sankhyas, and the Purva Mimamsakas. Advaita Vedanta was what you might call a Johnny-come-lately. So by the time Shankaracharya came and the followers of Shankaracharya and it flowered, the Buddhists were already fading away. So there wasn't a long, consistent debate. There was, but not enough. So Buddhists had no time to react against what these new Vedantists were saying, the Advaitins, the new formulations of Vedanta. They had no time to react. And the Advaita reactions against the Buddhists, if you see the classical texts, they're very dismissive, that these people are nihilists. They're saying that there's nothing real, which is unfair because Nagarjuna dismisses that. He says, we are not nihilists. We're just saying even that is not true, that there's no truth, that's not true. There is a particular truth, that's also not true. So I'll walk through Chandrakirti's presentation of his attack. Chandrakirti's works have now become very important because they were transmitted to Tibet, and the greatest lamas in the Tibetan tradition, they built upon Chandrakirti's work. So according to them, Chandrakirti is the right interpretation of Nagarjuna, who is the right interpretation of Buddha. If you want to understand Buddha philosophically, you understand Nagarjuna. You want to understand Nagarjuna philosophically, you understand Chandrakirti. Among the great Tibetan masters, of course, there was no connection between them, who were in the high Tibetan plateau, Himalayan plateaus, 500-600 years ago, working there on Chandrakirti. For them, India was this fabled land cut off. By the time India had descended into tumult, invasion, warfare, and general collapse, and the establishment of the new Mughal Empire and all. So they had sort of lost touch with India. And the Buddhists also had disappeared. So the Indians in general also had little interest in the Tibetan Buddhists. So they were cut off. But they developed Indian thought. They preserved it and developed it. Many of these texts were later recovered from Tibet. They had been lost when the libraries in India had been burnt. So the important ones whom we studied at Harvard, the Tibetan masters, Tsongkhapa, who lived about 600 years ago, he deserves to be widely known across the world because what Nagarjuna is to Buddhism, Indian Buddhism, what Shankaracharya is to Vedanta, Tsongkhapa is to Tibetan Buddhism. Is that important, 600 years ago. So, for example, the school that he is the founder of, or the main philosopher, that's the school of the Dalai Lama. There are multiple schools of Tibetan Buddhism. There is the Sakyapa, the Kagyupa, there is the Nyingmapa, and the Gelugpa. The Gelugpa is a development based on the work of Tsongkhapa. The Gelugpa is the school of the Dalai Lama. And the Dalai Lama always comes from the Gelug. There are particular monks, if you can see them with the yellow hats. So they're the Gelug monks. They revere Chandrakirti like nothing. I mean, they're like the greatest philosopher from India for them, Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti. So what I'm saying is the development of Chandrakirti's work, the commentaries of Tsongkhapa, another great Tibetan master, Mipham, who came later, who takes into account multiple Tibetan views and syncretizes them into sort of harmonizing Tibetan views. And an opposite view, the Karmapa Lama, who is the ninth Karmapa, Wangchuk Dorje, who lived up, I think, 400 years ago or so, who, in fact, attacked Tsongkhapa. So in Tibetan Buddhism also there's a lot of debate. On all of this is based what I'm going to say. Why this? Because I worked on it, of course, but also this is one of the most sophisticated attacks on the concept of Atma. And we are going to see one of the most sophisticated defense of the concept of Atma. So this is what we are going to see. The 7-point reasoning of Chandrakirti. What is he going to refute? That there is no independent self. You are there, he doesn't deny. But the idea that I am an immortal soul, I am an Atma, I exist eternally, I am not the body, not the mind. Then this self, what is its relation to you? Clearly you are there. And yet you think you are an Atma. So what is that relationship of the Atma to this body-mind? Just by the way, I will keep saying body-mind because it's easiest for us. The Buddhists, not just Tibetan Buddhists, not just Chandrakirti, all Buddhists, they talk about the 5 aggregates. Instead of body-mind, they analyze it into 5 aggregates or 5 pillars or 5 heaps. What is this body-mind? First, Rupa Skandha, physical body, the form, the Rupa Skandha, physical body, the body aggregate. Then there is Vedana Skandha, that is feelings, pleasurable, painful, neutral, the sensations we get. Vedana Skandha. Then there is Sanskara Skandha, thoughts in our mind, mental formations. That's the third one. Mental, the pillar, the mental aggregate, mind aggregate. Then we are aware. We are aware all the time. Consciousness, Vijnana Skandha. But this awareness, remember, these are flashes of consciousness, moment to moment to moment. Then the last one is the Vijnana Skandha, then the Rupa, Vedana, the Sangya. Sangya is the Samskara and Sangya, the 2 kinds of mental skandhas are there. So the conditioning, mental conditioning as samskaras, and Sangya as the thoughts and feelings we get, the mind, all the perceptions which come. The 5 senses plus the mind. The 6 kinds of perceptions we have, internal thinking and external things which are coming from outside, that's called the Sangya. So Rupa Skandha, the Vedana Skandha, the Sangya Skandha, Samskara Skandha, and Vijnana Skandha. This together is exactly, they're just trying to describe what you feel, what I feel right now. I'm just going to call it body-mind. Okay, that's easiest, body-mind. Chandrakirti would have said Panchaskandha, 5 skandhas, 5 aggregates. But just the same thing, body-mind. For example, we study Vedanta. We all know Panchakosha. It's pretty similar, not exactly the same, but pretty similar. Physical body, the Annamaya Kosha, food sheath. Then the vital body, Pranamaya, the vital sheath. Then the mental body, the Manomaya. Then the intellect, understanding, Vijnanamaya. And then the causal body, the Anandamaya. But again, you can just call it body-mind, just what we have right now. So what is the relationship of self, Atma, with this body-mind? That is the question. He's going to examine this. To examine this, Chandrakirti uses the example of a chariot. So a chariot and its parts. Why a chariot? I guess chariot was the most sophisticated, cool thing you had in those days. Today he would have said an SUV or something like that, but it works like that. An SUV and its parts. You know, the body of the SUV, the wheels and the axle and the engine, the steering and all of that. And where is the SUV? The question is, what is the relationship of the chariot to its parts? Where is the self? What is the relationship of the so-called self, Atma, to the body-mind? Because body-mind, everybody agrees it's there. Nobody denies it. But what is the relation of the self to the Hindus? Then by Hindus, whom do I mean? Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, Purva Mimamsa. They all claim that apart from the body, mind, and there is Atma. What is the nature of the Atma? Some will say it's pure consciousness, whatnot, but it's there. Separate, independent, interacting, all together. So you have a trichotomous personality, that is physical body, subtle body, that is mind, and the Atma. Chandrakirti says, not at all. Let's see. Let's take a look. First, 7-point reasoning. First point, the chariot is the same as its parts. And he says it can't be so. Second point, I'll explain. Second point, the chariot is something apart from its parts. That's even more ridiculous. Then the chariot is something that is contained in the parts. It can't be so. The chariot is something that contains its parts. It can't be so. Then the chariot is something that possesses its parts. These are my parts, like my hand, my hair, like that. Can't be so. And then the sixth one would be the chariot is just a collection of its parts. That also is not possible. Then chariot is just the shape that emerges from its parts. The chariot is the shape, the configuration of its parts. That also is not possible. These are the 7 ways in which a chariot can be there, can be related to the parts. And none of them are viable. Chandrakirti is going to show exactly like that. There are 7 ways you can talk about an Atma. None of them are logical. So there is no Atma. So this is the outline. Let me dive into it. First, the chariot is the parts, is literally the parts. That is not true. Just the parts themselves of the chariot, then why would you use a term like chariot? If it's literally the axle and the wheels and all, and that's it. Why will we call it a chariot? If body-mind is Atma is literally body-mind, then several problems emerge. And notice, all the Hindus also agree with you, in the Buddhists also, that Atma is not body-mind, but he's just considering the possibilities. The Buddhists themselves, Chandrakirti himself says, if you just call this Atma, first of all, he calls it as redundancy. Then just call it body, call it mind. Why are you calling it Atma? Literally, there's nothing more to Atma than this. Then that's just the Atma. Then just the body, mind. Why call it Atma at all? Then next, it's not immortal. It's not immortal. You always claim it's an immortal Atma. It's not immortal. You also admit body dies. Third is that you always feel Atma is one. It is one, indivisible. The body is many. It's complex. It's enormous number of parts interacting, changing all the time. How can it be the Atma you are talking about? Notice, Advaita Vedanta, if you remember Aparoksha Anubhuti classes, Shankaracharya uses the same argument, Ekam Anekam. Atma is one, the body is constituted of many, therefore the Atma is not the body. Then many other problems. Like Hindus, Buddhists also believe many lives are there. If many lives are there, the body does not go across many lives. Body dies at the end of this life. Then it can't be the Atma. You're saying Atma persists over many lives. And then this body does not perceive so. So obviously, pretty obviously, the body is not the Atma the way you think. The self, eternal self, one self. No, it's not there. So the first point, the chariot and the parts are not the same. I mean, the chariot cannot be the parts. The first point was the chariot is the parts, not possible. The Atma is body-mind, not possible. And here is no real difference because all the other Hindu schools, including the Advaitins, would clearly agree on the same grounds that the body-mind is not Atma, is not the self. Good. We are agreed here. Next. Let's go on. The next option. The chariot is something different from the parts. And Chandrakirti says that's ridiculous on the face of it. I mean, it would really solve all your parking problems, It's the parts which take up all the problem. If the SUV is different from the body and the wheels and the engine, then you can keep the parts at home and just come in your SUV. And then it'll be easy to park here. You can even bring it inside and keep it in the hall because it won't take any space at all. The space is taken only by the parts. Where is the chariot apart from the parts? So there is no chariot apart from the parts of the chariot, clearly. Where is this Atma apart from the body? Here was the biggest attack. This is the central attack of the Buddhist. You talk about body, mind. I agree, there is a body, there is a mind. There are the 5 aggregates. But apart from this, what is the Atma you're talking about? Demonstrate it. And nothing that you want to talk about, future lives, memory, all of those things don't require a separate, independent, eternal Atma. We can demonstrate, we Buddhists can demonstrate multiple lifetimes, memory, all of these are possible without an independent, separate Atma. In fact, with an independent, separate Atma, these are not possible. So there's a lot of discussion about this. at this point you might think, Swami, so many years you have been telling us, not the body, not the mind, I'm the witness, the consciousness, drig drishya viveka, seer and seen. Whatever you see is an object, that which sees is separate from the object. Didn't you tell us, what about those arguments? Seer and the seen, you remember, drig drishya viveka, I am the witness. Whatever is experienced is an object, I am the witness, I am the experiencer, I am the awareness to which all these objects appear. And this witness, the drashta, the seer, must be on principle separate from the seen. Or the pancha kosha, famous 5 sheets of the human body, the annamaya, pranamaya, manomaya, vijnanamaya, anandamaya, and the witness consciousness of that. How many times have you told us the story of the 10th man? Separate. You could not separate it because you are looking at the object. This is the subject. So you separate. It's separate from the body-mind. Or avastatraya, witness of waking, dreaming, deep sleep. So isn't it separate from all of it, the consciousness? Actually, no, it isn't. Swami, you're pulling a fast one on us. No, there's a point to it. We'll see the point later on. But it isn't. Even Shankaracharya, in Aparoksha Anubhuti, if you remember, after carefully analyzing the body-mind and showing that you, the self, cannot be the body-mind, you are separate, you are one, the body is many, you are unchanging, the body is changing, you are the witness, the body is the witnessed, you are aware, the body is not aware. So all of these arguments he shows to show that you are not the body. But if you remember, that's the 40th, 41st, 42nd verse of Aparoksha Anubhuti, very crucial. He says there, quite puzzlingly, what good is all this? Kim purusharthata, what will be served? You have just proved that there is an Atma and there is a world and 2 separate realities. It's not non-duality. Then why do you do this? There's a reason why the Advaitins do it. In order to counter those who say body-mind is the Atma. Our unreflective state of awareness is that I am this one. So I am body, I am mind. To convince us this can't be true. That's the only reason the Advaitins attack the concept of body-mind as self. The self cannot be body-mind. Then what is the self? We'll come to that. So actually, this is where the Buddhists and the Advaitins together differ from the Hindu dualists. The Hindu dualists, the Nayayikas, the Sankhyas, Yoga, Vaisheshika, they all insist there is a self separate from body-mind, Atma. And then they engage in long debate, nearly 1,000 years debate, culminating with masters like Udayanacharya on the Nyaya side, who gave multiple proofs. There's a whole book which is still studied in postgraduate philosophy departments in India, Indian philosophy departments. That is Nyaya Kusumanjali. Atma Tattva Viveka. So Nyaya Kusumanjali, 9 proofs of the existence of God against the Buddhist. Atma Tattva Viveka, multiple proofs of the existence of a separate, eternal, independent soul. Atma against the Buddhists. So it's called Atma Tattva Viveka. Extremely subtle argument. Does it work? According to the Nayayikas, it does. According to most unbiased observers, it's not so easy. Swami Vivekananda points it out in the 4th lecture on practical Vedanta. A tremendous Buddhist attack. Here is the world, it's a mass of change. Here is the body, it's a mass of change. Here is the mind, it's a mass of change. Physical matter, mental thoughts, and a stream of change. Apart from this, where is this Atma? Use the Vedantic logic. Oh, but who is the witness of all of this? That's the logic. I can see people vigorously. Yes, we have heard you so many years. Last 5-6 years you have been telling us the witness of all of this. Not the object. You are the 10th man witnessing all of this. Now, don't get scared. I'm going to cut that down. It isn't true. Why not? You see. This can be quite scary and traumatic for Hindus. But the reason I'm doing this is, at the end of this process, we end up with a deeper understanding of what Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta is. We are going to leave the poor dualists out in the cold, but we are going to see what Advaita Vedanta really means and the emptiness school of Buddhism, what they really mean. So, I'll quote Vivekananda again. this idea that I am a continuous consciousness. Literally, I'm quoting Vivekananda. It seems he's saying anti-Vedantic things. This idea that I am a continuous consciousness and thoughts, feelings, body, they're all continuously changing and I'm witnessing them. He says it works as an argument, but nobody in practice can separate the two. I am the witness of anger, hate, joy, peace, restless mind. I say these things. Restless mind, you are the one who experienced it. Peaceful mind, you are the one who experienced it. Waking, dreaming, deep sleep, you are the one who experienced it. But Vivekananda says, and Chandrakirti would say, he doesn't say because he never engaged with this, but he would say, if they are separate, show them separately. If two things are separate, my cloth and my cap are separate. I can show you the cloth without the cap. I can show you the cap without the cloth. Then I can demonstrate, you can experience their separate existence. Show me pure consciousness without any contents. Show me the contents of consciousness without consciousness. You can't. Nobody can. Because they don't exist separately. Chandrakirti has this thing. So what's going on here? If I am experiencing the changing world, and if you are saying that I am not unchanging, one unchanging consciousness, you can't show them separately, I see that you can't show them separately. But then what's going on here? How do you explain this? Chandrakirti has an analogy, which Vedantins, for good reasons, never use. The sheaves of hay leaning against each other. You know, hay, you bundle them up and keep them like this. But if you pull out one, what happens to the other one? It falls. You, the experiencer, you, the consciousness, and that, the experience, that, the object of consciousness, they lean against each other. Remove one, the other will fall. You are the seer of what? Nagarjuna would say. You see, right? I am seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. What? Forms, sounds, smells, tastes. Form, sounds, taste, do they exist without you, the consciousness? I can't say that. You, the seer and the hearer and the smeller and the taster, is it possible that you exist without the objects which you are seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting? Difficult to say. We Vedantins will say, no, it's like when the object is gone, you are no longer the seer of the object, but you remain, not as a seer anymore. But then that's a kind of, like a accounting, they do a little bit of back calculation to make things fit, make the books balance. Swami Vijnananandaji, when he was Swami in Allahabad, he had his own ways. He would keep books of account. And then one day he couldn't make 5 rupees, he couldn't account for 5 rupees. Then he put it down, GOK account, 5 rupees. Somebody asked him, what's that GOK account, Swami? He says, God only knows. God only knows. Now it balances. I am unchanging consciousness, illumining all the changing phenomena of the world. Suppose the changing phenomena of the world are not there, can you show you yourself as unchanging consciousness? Sure. In deep sleep, changing phenomena of the world stop. And I shine forth into the blankness. How do you know? Well, I wake up and I tell you this. That's how I know. No. And that might be all right. You might believe in that, but that's not good philosophy. I remember when I entered the Madhyamaka class, emptiness class on emptiness. So can you imagine, intense class on nothingness. You ask, what are you studying there? Debating fiercely. Nothing. It's all empty. The professor told me, keep your Advaita outside the door, Swami, because he knew I would mix it up with this. So you learn it separately, and then... but interestingly, outside the class, just outside the Harvard yard, I ran into this Buddhist Lama, Lama Migmar. If you look him up, later on I realized he's quite an eminent person. He is the Buddhist chaplain, Tibetan Buddhist chaplain for Harvard University. I just ran into him in the street, and he looked at me and said, what are you doing here? I said, I'm studying your philosophy. And he was very happy. He wanted to know which books I'm studying and all of that. And he recommended some more books. And then he said, but you are a non-dualist, an Advaitic monk. I said, yes. Oh, it's the same. He said. But how it's the same, we'll come to it at the end. So the second one, that you are apart, Atma, self is apart from body and mind. all the arguments that I have given are logically good. Vivekananda himself says, but who has ever seen it separately? The pure consciousness by itself. It can't be. Logically, you can't experience. Even if it's there, you can't experience it. You need body-mind to certify. Then Chandrakirti says, we are back to the hails, the sheaves of hay, one depending on the other. How do you know one exists without the other? Then the third option is, well, does the chariot exist in the parts? I see the parts, so in that there is a SUV, there's a chariot, in the parts of the chariot. One commentator, Tibetan commentator, he says, like a bowl in which berries are kept. So the parts of the chariot are there, in that there is a chariot. Obviously not. That's silly. That relationship is also not there. And the Atma also. Nobody till today. If you say body, mind is there, there is an Atma. Search the body. However much you search the body, do surgery, find out here in the heart, somewhere the heart Atma is there, or in the brain, somewhere inside there is the Atma. And philosophers have thought about it. Pineal gland, Descartes, the point of the interaction of the mind and body, things like that. But nothing, it's just body. The more and more you search, it's just body. One doctor from Scotland, Indian doctor, he wrote to me that I had an epiphany. I had been examining scans of the body for the last few decades in my career. Just today, I saw a scan and it just struck me. I am not that. There's no me in any of that. It's just a machine. It's a thing. It's a thing. True. There is no Atma in this body. I mean, literally speaking, we talk about in there. Vedantic language, you are the Atma in there. Pratyak, inner self. The Buddhist Chandrakirti says, all right, I'll take you seriously. Show me where is it inner? How is it inner? Upanishad, Atma tu ratinam vidhi, shariram ratamevatu. The self is the passenger and the body is the chariot. Curiously, Chandrakirti's chariot doesn't have a passenger. Very tellingly. So, the passenger is in the SUV, in the chariot. Good. Let's examine the chariot. Let's examine the body. Where is the passenger? So, no, it's not the body. You don't understand. It's the mind. You are in the mind. Examine the mind. Where is the Atma? You find only thoughts, memories, ideas, pleasure, pain, desire, waking, dreaming, sleeping. Where is Atma in the mind? Where is this internal soul, unchanging, independent soul in the mind? David Hume, the great Scottish philosopher, he says, I examine my internal states and I find a steady procession of dispositions, thoughts, memories, perceptions. I find nothing corresponding to a self. At this point you might say, Swami, 10th man, the observer. I know, but we won't go there. So, Atma is not something contained. Chariot is not contained in the parts, like as the Tibetan Lama said, like a bowl and with berries in it. There is the parts of the chariot, in that there is a chariot. No. Then this is the, what is the third option? The fourth option is the reverse. The parts are contained in the chariot. So chariot is the basis on which the parts exist. That's also ridiculous. I mean, what does it mean? It's like saying there is a car in which there are the parts. You might say it like that, but you can't show me anything like a car apart from the parts. You can show me a bowl apart from the berries, but you can't show me a car apart from its parts. Car is not a bowl in which the berries are put. Now, this is actually a subtle point when you come to the Atma, because Vedantins mystics talk about the ground of all existence, as if there is a ground on which everything has been put. So, Atma is the ground of all existence. So, is there any such ground on which body-mind has been put? There is an Atma on which body-mind rests. Well, Vedantins don't mean it in that way. We'll come to that, what Vedantins mean. But as a ground, as a basis on which the parts exist, there's no such chariot. There is no such Atma on which the body, mind, hands and feet and thoughts and all are put, like a table. And that table is the self. No such thing is there. Who has ever seen such a thing? That's the fourth one. Fifth one was, no, you are just twisting my words. The dualist will say. When I say Atma, when I say soul, I mean I I am the possessor of this body-mind. In my body, my hands, my ears, Lama Tsongkhapa, he says, like Devadatta, who says, my ears. So, like that. And so it's interesting how the Tibetans, in writing the scriptures, they use Sanskrit names. Those are not Indian names. Those are not Tibetan names. Those are names which were used in ancient Indian philosophical discourse. So Devadatta says, my ears, like that. Atma is the one which possesses the body, my mind. Isn't it how the Hindu dualists speak? But look at the chariot and its parts. Is there any chariot which possesses its parts? The chariot say, the SUV say, this is my tires and my engine and my... Is there any such SUV apart from the parts which says, I am the owner of this SUV? No. I am the owner of these parts? No. There is no such owner. All of these, I am somebody with all these body-mind. I own this body-mind. I am in this body-mind. We all feel this. So how does Chandrakirti explain this feeling? He says not only him, all Buddhists say, it's an illusion created by the continuity of body-mind. They give the example of Alata Chakra, a flame. If you whirl it round, it looks like a circle. The fan which you see now, it looks like a disc when it moves very fast. But it's just one point of flame, moving fast. Similarly, flashes of thoughts, feelings, emotions, as they go one after another without ceasing, you feel like you are a self. I am the self which possesses thoughts, feelings, emotions, body. But actually there are only these thoughts, feelings, emotions, body, the changes of the body. That's all that there is. 5 skandhas, 5 pillars, which are continuously changing themselves. That's all that there is, according to the Buddhists. Now, then this is the no possessor. There is no self which possesses body-mind. I feel it. You feel it. It's not real. It's an illusion generated by the body-mind. Imagine in your dreams also. You feel, I am here talking to somebody. When you wake up, neither you were there, nor that person was there. So that feeling came, that I am there, but that was an illusion. Like that, this illusion generated by the continuously changing body-mind. Then what more is there? The 6th option. Look, the chariot is the parts. Is the combination, there's the parts there, the chariot. That's what you call the chariot, the collection of the parts. Not literally the parts themselves. That was the first option. But the collection of the parts. That's what I mean. This collection of the parts is the chariot. Atma is the collection of mind, body, consciousness, all of it together. Body-mind is Atma, this collection. But if you keep the collection of the parts separately, is that a chariot? You keep a wheel here and the axle there and another wheel there. Is that a chariot? No, that's just a collection of parts. There's no chariot there. Similarly, in the continuously changing body and mind, which collection are you talking about? And if you collect them like that, which is the Atma? Then the last option would be, it is the configuration, the shape. Look, somebody might say in exasperation, Chandrakirti, you are a great philosopher, you're confusing me. It's a simple thing. Arrange the parts in a particular configuration, that way, and that is chariot. You think, yeah, that's what it is, right? You arrange, put the parts together, fit it together, and that's the chariot. But Chandrakirti says, my dear man, don't you see? Then that's not like an eternal self which is existing apart from body-mind. It's a shape which emerges from the parts of the chariot. If you put them together in a particular way, it emerges, the shape emerges. It does not exist apart from the part. And that shape does not exist in the parts also. The parts don't look like a chariot. The wheel doesn't look like a chariot. The axle doesn't look like a chariot. If you put them all nearby, they don't look like a chariot. Arranged in a particular way, a particular shape emerges. That shape you label chariot and you use as chariot. That the Buddhist and Chandrakirti does not deny. But where is this, in the same way, where is this eternal separate reality called Atma? If you say, living body is there, thinking mind is there, senses are working, thoughts are coming, understanding is going on, happiness, misery is going on. This thing I'm labeling as self. Fine. That's called the transactional self. But there's no ultimate self there. There's no eternal self there. There is no one I who has gone from lifetime to lifetime. No. Not even from moment to moment. The Buddhists think of momentary existence. This is real, disappears, another one comes up. There's no eternal Atma persisting across these changes. So even the shape of the parts is not the chariot. So 7 options. All of them, if you examine them and connect them to self and body-mind, you will find there's no way a self, an Atman, could exist in this body-mind. Could have any relation with this body-mind. No way you could understand this body-mind which makes sense as an Atma. Okay, very quickly. We have seen what the Advaitin says. I'll quickly say what, from an Advaitic perspective. Advaita has a very good answer to this. Advaita says, first of all, body-mind is not the Atma. The first one, is body-mind Atma? Literally, the first option is, chariot is the parts. Body-mind is Atma. And Chandrakirti shows it's not possible, and as non-dualists, we completely agree, and all other Hindu schools also agree, because they want to show Atma separately. Second, Atma is separate from body-mind, and Chandrakirti shows it cannot be so. There is no chariot apart from the parts. Similarly, there is no Atma apart from body-mind. And all the arguments that the Hindus show, the dualists show, they can be faulted, because you really cannot show them separately. A limited self, Atma, cannot be demonstrated apart from one body-mind. As Vivekananda also says, in logic you can say, I am the continuous witness of all the changes. Show me in practice. Has anyone, this is his words, has anyone been able to show them in practice separately? No. Here the Advaitin says that we don't actually intend to say that. We say that, we are saying that you are not the body-mind. To demonstrate that, we show that you are the witness of the body-mind, but we don't want to say that there is a separate witness of body-mind, each body-mind has a separate witness. No, that's not Advaita Vedanta, that's actually Sankhya. We do this in order to say Dehatmavada, in order to cut at the root of identification with body-mind. We have a natural tendency to cling to the body-mind, and in order to show that, we show that you cannot be the body-mind. That much only. Then what do you want to say? What is the non-dualist response? How do you want to establish the Atman? The non-dualist response is very interesting, and it's not covered by the 7-fold reasoning of Chandrakirti. One example will make it very clear. Gold and ornaments, one which I use. You have bracelets, you have necklaces, you have rings, and they're all made of gold. Somebody comes and tells you that the reality is gold. The reality is not actually a bracelet or a bracelet, ring, necklace. They are names. They are particular forms. They are uses. Bracelet looks like this. You put it on your wrist. Necklace looks like this. You put it on your neck. Ring looks like this. You put it on your finger. So names are different. Forms are different. Use is different. But the material, the reality of all of them is gold. That's the gold and ornament example which Advaita favors. Now, applied to the 7-fold reasoning, you will see immediately what it means. Is gold the same as the necklace? No. Point 1. Gold is not the same as the necklace. Gold can be the ring also. Gold can be the bracelet also. Gold can be something else. Then second, is gold something apart from the ornaments? No. That is the beauty of it. When you say gold is something different from the ornaments, what the Advaitin means is not that gold is another type of ornament. It is a separate reality. Separate reality, immediately we think that, so there is a body, mind, Atma. Advaita says not like that. You can never say necklace, bracelet, ring, gold. You can't do that. It's not a separate ornament. But is it separate? In a very deep sense, certainly. Because it is the reality which appears as necklace, bracelet, ring. You, the one limitless consciousness, are the reality which appears as the waker and your waking world, as the dreamer and your dream world, as the deep sleeper and the blankness of deep sleep. We are not saying the waker is somebody separate from the entire waking world and body-mind. No. The waker and the waking world, including body-mind, they appear in one awareness, one limitless awareness. And Chandrakirti says, so you are saying that the Atman is the basis, the ground. It contains body-mind. No. Again, it's not that gold is like a bowl in which a necklace has been put. It's not like that. It's not like that. Swami Vivekananda himself says how Advaita settles this problem. He says not that there is a rope in which there is a snake. It is the rope alone which is mistaken to be the snake. It is the gold alone which is taken as the necklace. It's not that gold is a separate thing in which a necklace has been put. That option also is rejected. So it's not like that. It doesn't fall in that category, the fourth category. The opposite also, is there a gold in the necklace, in the bracelet, in the ring? Like you said, there is a chariot in the parts. Is there Atma in the body mind? You might say, if that inadvertently we might agree, yes, there is gold in the necklace. But that's not true. It's not that there is a necklace in which some gold has been put. It's not that there is a wave in which some water has been put. It is the gold alone with a particular name, form and function, it's a necklace. Another name, form and function, which is the bracelet. It is the water alone which appears as wave, small, big, foam, drops of water, tsunami waves, all are that water only. It's not that water is something in which wave has been put, or a wave is something in which water has been put. So those are the third and fourth options in the chariot example, sevenfold reasoning. Is Atma, pure consciousness, Brahman, the possessor of body mind? Again, use the gold and necklace example. Is gold the possessor of a necklace? Does gold go around wearing a necklace? No. They are not two separate entities. Again, you see that example answers the question. So is the chariot just the parts, the collection of the parts? There's no chariot which is a collection of the parts. Is the Atma the collection of all of this together? All of them together is called Atma. All the necklaces together, necklaces and bracelet and ring together, is it called gold? No. Gold can exist without, you melt all of them. Destroy all the necklaces, just melt them down to still be gold. Change them into tiaras or whatever, still be gold. So gold is not a collection of the golden ornaments. And finally, it's the shape, more so. And gold is not the shape of a necklace or a shape of a bracelet. It's not a form, not a particular form which is called gold. No more than a chariot is a particular shape emerging out of parts. So the sevenfold reasoning, it is effective against the individual self which is put forth by the dualists, and it's difficult to answer. So this is one of the most sophisticated attacks of the Mahayana Buddhists against the concept of a Atma. But the Advaitic idea of self, the philosophy of self, Atma, slips through this net. I wrote that it slips through Chandrakirti's net. What actually Chandrakirti would have made of this, we don't know, because he never got a chance to engage with the non-dualists, with the Advaitins. But one can see how amazingly similar the Madhyamaka Buddhism of Tibet, of Indo-Tibetan Buddhism, and Advaita Vedanta, they're very similar, often using same language. It's like they're not exactly the same, but they use like mirror images. One states the same truth negatively, the other one, the Advaitins, try to state the same truth positively. The danger of each is this. If you try to state it negatively, the danger is that you will be taken for a nihilist, that you are ultimately saying nothing exists. It's unfair, because Nagarjuna himself has said, we are not asadvadins, that we are not saying that nothing exists. Those who misunderstand emptiness in this way, he says, Yatha sarpo durgrihita. This is a quotation from Nagarjuna, Mula Madhyamaka Karika. As a serpent falsely held. If you hold a serpent in the wrong end, you're going to get bitten. If you misunderstand emptiness as nothing, you're going to get bitten. You will not attain liberation or nirvana. The problem of misunderstanding emptiness is that you end up with nihilism, nothing. The problem of misunderstanding Advaita, non-dual Vedanta, is that you end up with something. You think that Brahman is a thing, Atman is a thing. It's not a thing. It's more real. Then it's nothing. No, it's not nothing either. It's more real than nothing and more real than things also. So I always put it this way, it is no thing. No thing. And this is something acceptable to both sides. If you say Atman, Brahman is nothing, what do I mean by that? It's not an object. To them, if you say it's nothing, then they will understand that it's not. You're not talking about an eternal reality. You're not talking about nothing. You are not talking about interdependent existence of the transactional reality, what Nagarjuna called Samritti Satyam. So it will be acceptable to both. Swami Sarvapriyananda, in his biography of Sri Ramakrishna, the great master, he says, what the Buddhists call emptiness, we call fullness. He says, what they call shunyam, we call it purnam. Would the Buddhists agree? One remarkable book was suggested by a Buddhist scholar and practitioner recently, which I got, Progressive Stages of Meditation on Emptiness. Progressive Stages of Meditation on Emptiness, by a modern Tibetan Lama who has written this. Tiny book, he sums up the entire range of Buddhist teaching in 5 stages of understanding, deeper and deeper understandings of emptiness. First understanding is the Theravada understanding, that there is a mass of change outside. There's a mass of change in the body and the mind. Here there is no self. That is the emptiness of the self. First stage of understanding. Then he teaches how you meditate on that, what are the benefits of that. Second stage of understanding, the mind-only school, Yogachara Vijnanavada, who says, no, there is no mass of change outside. It's all in the mind. The mind is a series of changes, and in that appears a changing external world. There is really no external world at all. It's all in the mind. It's a series of changes, and and creates an illusion of a continuous self. Mind-only school, Chitta Matra, mind-only, or Vijnanavada. And these are different names. Yogachara Vijnanavada, very ancient school, going back nearly to Vasubandhu, 1600, 1700 years. That's the second stage of emptiness. There's no world also. It's an appearance in the mind. Third stage of emptiness, there's no mind also. That is the Madhyamaka school, the emptiness school. World is empty, mind is empty. How do you understand that? Remember the 2 sheaves of hay leaning on each other. Remove one, the other one also will fall. Then what's real? Won't say. Keep quiet. If you say it, you're wrong. Like Nagarjuna said, if you say something and cut it down, remember the 4-fold logic. What will you say? You will say either it is wrong, it's not wrong, it is and is not wrong, neither is nor is not wrong. So all those things he will prove wrong. So the emptiness school says neither there is a real world, a mind which imagines a world, nor there is an external world. So emptiness of world and the emptiness of the self, of the mind. And then among the Madhyamaka, emptiness school, there are 2 varieties. And these varieties developed in Tibet actually. They say that it was in India, but they generally developed it in Tibet. One is called Swatantrika Madhyamaka, another one is called Prasangika Madhyamaka. The independent argument school and the consequentialist school. I will not go into that. It's a huge debate. The books and books have been written on it. And the Tibetans spent some 500 years fighting over it. So it's a huge subject. But basically, the first school says emptiness of the world, emptiness of the self. The last one, the Prasangika Madhyamaka, 4th school of emptiness, they say that emptiness of emptiness is also empty. Don't take shunyata as an reality. I'm just saying this one thing, but it's too complex to say. But that Prasangika Madhyamaka is the final school of Buddhist Tibetan thought, which is prevalent now. That's what, if you go to learn Buddhist philosophy from the Dalai Lama and his teachers, and the teachers there, they will teach you Prasangika Madhyamaka. In fact, in Tibet, one way of cutting you down is to accuse you of being a Swatantrika Madhyamaka, the independent argument, middle path, emptiness school. All right. So, what remains? The last stage, 5th one, what this Lama calls Mahamadhyamaka, the great middle path. It's called the Shentong. It's something that was suppressed. The books were burned, the monasteries were destroyed and converted into the consequentialist school. So there's some history behind it. But whatever survives, if you look at it, what do they say? Yes, everything is empty, fine. Emptiness of emptiness also. But then, where is it all happening? What is the truth of all of that? He says there is this, they say, basic space of awareness in which everything arises like dreams, like constructions and fabrications, like clouds gathering together in a vast blue sky. In this, we use these terms, in the clear light of the void, all of samsara and nirvana are arising and falling together. You go from samsara to nirvana by practicing all this, and then you realize both are appearances. Even nirvana is not real. Reality is this vast, unlimited, basic space of awareness, which is literally the translation of the Advaitic Chidakasha. Literally, a very beautiful term, the sky of consciousness, sky of awareness. So, literally Atman or Brahman. So, at that stage, the final development, the Mahamudra, and this is something the consequentialist Madhyamaka, the Prasangika Madhyamaka will not admit. They will say our development is the last. And what I studied at Harvard suggested that our development is the last. But the Lama outside Harvard said it's the same. And what he meant was this last final stage. This last final stage, literally the two come together. The Advaita Vedanta, the final development of Advaita Vedanta, and the final development of Tibetan Buddhism. They come together in this non-dualist, they will call it emptiness, we call it fullness. They call it pure awareness, we call it pure awareness. And they say that is the very nature, they call it the Buddha nature, we call it Brahman. And that Buddha nature there? It's there for everybody, all the time. In fact, everybody is an appearance in that. That's the only thing that there really is. But only thing that really is, you can imagine, Chandrakirti, Sankhapa and all in alarm. Thing is. No. You can't say such things. I will end with Sri Ramakrishna. We'll give the last word to Sri Ramakrishna. In the collection of sayings of Sri Ramakrishna, the first saying collected by Swami Brahmananda is Sri Ramakrishna, devotee, Hindu of Hindus, devotee of Kali. His choicest sayings, and in that number 1, he says, when you know yourself, you know God. All right, that's still pretty Hindu. The next, that's Advaitic. The next, he says, what do you mean knowing yourself? Inquire into yourself. Where is this I in this body-mind? He says, is it the hands? Is it the flesh? Is it the blood, the bones? As you inquire into the body and into the mind, he says, I'm quoting from him, you will find there is nothing corresponding to the I. He says, it's empty. This is Tibetan Buddhist, not even Nagarjuna's language. This is the language of Chandrakirti, of Tsongkhapa and others. It is empty. He says it's like peeling an onion. You peel it, and you think you'll come to an essence. That would be the Hindu thinking. You peel off physical, vital, mental, intellectual, and the causal body, you come to Atma. No. He says you keep peeling, you find nothing. And if he stops at that point, he would be perfectly acceptable as the next Tsongkhapa, I think. But then he adds one more thing. He says, what remains is consciousness, Atma. That's where it comes together again. Somebody in the presence of Sri Ramakrishna said, Buddha was literally the word is Nastik, atheist, who did not accept the ultimate reality. And Sri Ramakrishna said in Bengali, Nastik keno hote jabe go, mukhe bolte parini. Why should he be an atheist? Atheist is too narrow a term, who does not accept that there is an ultimate reality. Nastik literally means one who doesn't accept the Vedas, and that is true. Buddha did deny at least the ritualistic portion of the Vedas. But Sri Ramakrishna says, why should he be a Nastik? Why should he be an atheist? He could not express what he found in language. And then he says something which is startling. Osti nastir majhe shai thik thik. That means where it is between is not and is, between eternalism and between nihilism, the middle path between that is precisely it. Today, after listening to the Tibetan Lamas and Professor Garfield and reading enormous amounts of handouts, I can say the same thing. How did Sri Ramakrishna say this? Because of all the things he was exposed to, he was never exposed to Tibetan Buddhism. If he had said it is beyond existence and non-existence, beyond, that's a very Hindu language. Gita says this. Nasat nasaduchyate. The Brahman is not that something which is manifest or something which is unmanifest. Beyond the manifest and the unmanifest is Brahman. Krishna says this to Arjuna in the Gita. But between, that language of between eternalism and nihilism, between asti and nasti, that between language is peculiarly Buddhist, and that also peculiarly Tibetan Buddhist. So, yes. So at that point, we will leave it. And I think, yeah, so this is sort of in sum of what we studied and what I went through and what I feel is my conclusion. And I think we can't look to the ancients for a conclusion because Shankara and Chandrakirti did not meet. And Tsongkhapa did not meet Madhusudan Saraswati and others. We have to do that groundwork. A few traditional Advaitins would agree with this. Many would not. Many Tibetan Lamas would not agree with it. But if you ask Tibetan Lamas of their view of Advaita Vedanta, I mean, that Lama said it's the same, but scholarly view, they would say, no, it's a kind of eternalism. They say there is something called Atma, Brahman, separate from everything which exists. But if you look deeply, that's not what we are saying. This reality, the very nature of this reality is Brahman. They will say samsara, nirvana are the same. Finally, we also agree. Gaudapada says, there is no cessation, no origination. No bondage, no liberation. No one making an effort for liberation and no one who is liberated. This is the final truth. Nagarjuna would give 100% marks to that. They would shake hands. Let me do a peace chant. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu. Salutations to Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother Ma Sharada, Swami Vivekananda, Bhagavan Buddha, and the great Acharyas, Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti and Tsongkhapa and Shankara and others, so that they may bless us with that vision, with that intuitive insight which liberates us from suffering, from samsara, which liberates us from samsara into nirvana, and from which perspective we can see that both samsara and nirvana are appearances in the reality that we are, our own inner reality.